This will be an overview of some of the recent enhancements to the integration between Illuminated Cloud and Salesforce DX. To start, I just want to show some of the extensions that have occurred to some of the more recent features to the official releases. If you're not familiar with it, I added a toolbar recently with all of the primary operations that you can perform in Illuminated Cloud. Provide very convenient access to them, and you'll notice that deploy, retrieve, refresh, things like that have been swapped out for Salesforce DX's push and pull model. And additionally, under the connection drop-down, if you haven't found this yet, it provides very convenient access to your configured connections. There's one click and it logs you into that org. And the traditional connections are present, but so are all of your Scratch org connections. So makes it very easy to get access to any of the orgs in which you're developing. So we can also go into the application settings, and you'll notice that the Salesforce DX settings, which have until now been under validation deployment, the only setting being the path to the executable, those have been moved out into their own tab. Over time, I expect that more and more settings will end up in here, and of course, it needed a little room to breathe. Right now, I have added some other settings for being able to discreetly control when Illuminated Cloud will use the CLI to do a force source push. That should generally be a fast operation, but depending upon what's going on, it can be a little bit time consuming. So you can decide when it happens, or if it happens automatically at all. You could obviously disable it and make it an explicit operation. So that's fully under your control. Moving over to the connections tab, the Scratch orgs have been interleaved with traditional orgs right here in the connection list, but now you also have the ability to, in addition to creating a traditional connection, you have the ability to create a new Scratch org. And what it does, it brings up a visual editor for what traditionally would have been, Scratch org JSON file, and you can even go ahead and import an existing Scratch org JSON file. I'll show more of this in just a moment, but I primarily just want to show that that plus the ability to now delete Scratch orgs gives you full cycle Scratch org management integrated into the IDE. You can even change the connection name, and it'll set the alias on the command line. I'm not going to do a delete now because it takes 30 seconds to a minute, and it's just not a very interesting operation. So let's take a look at the next workflow. So let's go into the new project wizard. For quite a while, there's been a new project wizard for Illuminated Cloud itself for traditional projects, and now I've added one for creating a new Salesforce DX project. So I'm going to go ahead and call this, IC SFDX. If I had one or more namespaces that were linked in with my Dev Hub, I could choose one here and begin working with metadata under that namespace if I'm developing managed packages. You of course get a tremendous amount of flexibility in the file system layout with Salesforce DX. You do have to have a minimum of one package directory. So this is just establishing the package directory name. The default is ForceApp. Let's just take the default. And then you decide where this gets laid down in the file system, your project. Defaults for me are fine here, and I do want it to generate the offline symbol table when I get done here. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on, and it will create that project in the file system. This is DX doing this for me, and when he gets done, Illuminated Cloud will add all the source roots and such as appropriate for the IDE itself to be able to use them. So we'll go ahead and let this finish. We'll open it in a new window and show you how you can create a new Scratch org. And for some reason, this is now taking a while. There we go. So the next step is to choose an existing Scratch org or create a new Scratch org. So it's going to go ahead and bring up the connection configuration here for the project, for the modules in the project. I could choose one of these Scratch orgs, but let's actually create a new Scratch org for this project. So now we'll go back into this screen, and I'm going to create a project called IC SFDX. You can see that it populated the alias field for me here. Aliases are technically optional in Salesforce DX. Personally, I think they should be mandatory. Otherwise, you don't have any continuity around a name that you can use to refer to Scratch orgs, because they are ephemeral in nature as they expire over time, and then you basically create new Scratch orgs to replace them behind as your working Scratch org. So in Illuminated Cloud, I do require you to put an alias value in order to be able to proceed with this wizard. And then you can choose your org shape, begin choosing your org shape by choosing the addition. If you wanted to establish a username, you could. It will generate one for you. It does need to be globally unique. Makes the alias even more important, again, for continuity across expired scratch orgs. And then admin email, country language, things like that. Of course, those can get populated here if you want, or they can get picked up from the Dev Hub. Let's move down and begin and continue setting up the org shape. So first thing we can do is set up features. By the way, these are searchable. So if I want to look for, currency, as you can see, it says search for. This is really true of all the various checkbox trees, things like that in Illuminated Cloud. Makes it very easy to move around in them. But let's just go ahead and choose the first three and say sites and move down to org preferences, again, part of the shape. And these, you can see on the right hand side, are organized categorically. And so you can see the categories on the right. The other thing I want to make clear here is this is a three-state system. What you see right now is it's going to use whatever the default disposition of this org preference is for the org edition that I chose above. If I want to explicitly disable something, say chatter, I can say check. You see it's bold and enabled. I can say check again, and it is now disabled. And then if I wanted to enable something because, say, I enable communities above, I can enable networks. And so you can pretty much decide what your org shape is. I'm going to say OK, and it's going to write down that JSON file for me under the config directory of the new project I've created. So I'm going to say OK. It's going to go out and create that scratch org. Takes a minute or two, whatever the time is, which is amazing to me, by the way. If you think about in the past the way that we created our development environments, for me it's traditionally been a DE org. Go into the web UI, create it, wait for your email to come in, go in and click in a million different places in order to get that org looking the way that you want, probably looking at a checklist that you have. And instead, that org's already been created with that specification. And all it's doing now is refreshing the list so that we can see it here and actually use it from within Illuminated Cloud. So as soon as this finishes listing it, we'll see it over here on the left. We'll go ahead and choose it as our connection for the org, and we'll move on and begin working with it. But to me, this is one of the best things about Salesforce DX is just the rapidity of being able to go out and create repeatable, consistent, well-defined environments. So we now have that org. We can go over here and choose it in the drop-down, say OK, and of course we did say we wanted the offline symbol table to be generated. So as soon as the offline symbol table gets generated, we'll go ahead and begin working with it. And importantly, when I say working with it, pretty much all the features of Illuminated Cloud are now available to Salesforce DX projects, except where they're not supported by the underlying system. Things like retrieve for merge, you just can't do that right now because Salesforce DX is controlling the retrieve. Selective retrieve, selective deployment, again, push and pull are pretty much doing that for you. So, but otherwise, we can begin working with Anonymous Apex, SQL Query Log Viewer, running unit tests, using the Apex Offline Debugger, viewing code coverage. All of those features just work. And so we'll go ahead and add a new class just to show that. So let's go over here and take a look at the project structure itself. You can see under the config directory that it did lay down the config file based on the org that I just created. So there that is. And then you can also see down here that it laid down my file system and set this directory as a source root. So let's go ahead and create a project under there. A class under there. So I see SFDX, and you can look at the bottom and see that because I had all those checkboxes on, Illuminated Cloud's automatically doing a push right now. So while it's pushing the initial version of this, let's go ahead and add a new method. Void do something. Very interesting. So we'll just go ahead and say hi. All right. And now what we'll do is go ahead and do a push as soon as this gets done. Looks like, as always, performance is going to be a little bit unpredictable. But as soon as this gets pushed, we'll go ahead and do another push with the latest method. So saving that, and then we'll go ahead and go down here and say I see SFDX dot do something and run that, and hi, there we go. So a couple of pauses while we waited for the server to respond. Yep, that's part of the tax of working in this world, but in my opinion, the fact that we just brought up an entire scratch org environment in like few minutes, including showing other features, is pretty cool. Kudos to the Salesforce DX team. So anyways, just wanted to show this. So the good news is this build with these features is now available on the issue tracker as a test build. Just look for the Salesforce DX enhancement request. More importantly, this is going to be the standard build here in the next few days. I'm just going to go ahead and fold it in. I want to do a little more testing, make sure I'm not going to break anything on the kind of traditional workflows, and then everybody will have access to Salesforce DX. And of course, between now and when Salesforce DX goes GA in a month or so, I'll track any additional changes that come in and update accordingly, and then everybody will have access to SFDX. So definitely exciting times. All right, I welcome any feedback. Just let me know what you think as you work with it. Let me know what's working well for you. If you have ideas on how to streamline your workflow, things like that. Obviously, if you find bugs. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks.